Evolutionary dynamics with temporal higher-order interactions are studied to understand how cooperation emerges in human societies. Researchers have made progress in modeling higher-order interactions using hypernetworks, which capture time-varying interactions among individuals. This study focuses on temporal hypernetworks to investigate how cooperation evolves when interactions are dynamic and involve more than two individuals. The findings suggest that temporal hypernetworks with sparse components and higher-order interactions can promote cooperation, potentially outperforming their static counterparts. The study also shows that interactions of moderately small order foster cooperation, while larger hyperlinks can be detrimental. This research underscores the significant impact of real-world temporal higher-order interactions on the evolution of cooperation. Here is a combined summary of pages 3 and 4 of the research paper. The authors investigate the impact of temporal hypernetworks on the evolution of cooperation. They start by analyzing a degree-homogeneous uniform temporal hypernetwork, where each individual has the same degree and all hyperlinks have the same size. The frequency of defectors is described by the replicator equation, which captures the net growth rate of cooperators. The authors introduce a similarity parameter delta, which represents the probability that hyperlinks remain unchanged when transitioning to the next subhypernetwork. The authors derive a critical value RC for cooperators to emerge, which is inversely proportional to the group size n and depends on the similarity parameter delta. They show that a larger group size promotes cooperation. To better capture the connectivity between nodes, the authors introduce the concept of connected density, which focuses on the internal structure of each component. They demonstrate that the average density of the temporal hypernetwork decreases rapidly and then increases as the time interval tau gets longer. The authors verify their findings by constructing synthetic temporal hypernetworks with different properties. They show that the connected density induced by the temporal characteristics of hypernetworks is crucial for the evolution of cooperation. They also compared temporal hypernetworks with static hypernetworks and find that temporality facilitates cooperation, especially when the interaction time is longer. The authors further investigate the impact of higher-order interactions on the evolution of cooperation. They contrast the effects of higher-order interactions with traditional pairwise interactions and find that representing group interactions as a set of pairwise interactions may lead to an underestimation of the potential for local interactions to promote cooperation. They demonstrate that hypernetworks can significantly facilitate cooperation compared to traditional networks based on pairwise interactions. Overall, the authors provide a comprehensive framework for understanding the evolution of cooperation on temporal hypernetworks, highlighting the importance of group size, connected density, and temporality in promoting cooperation. In the context of cooperation evolution, this research investigates the role of higher-order interactions and their temporal dynamics. It analyzes how the size of these interactions affects cooperation, particularly in scenarios where the population size is significantly larger than the hyperlink size. The study demonstrates that a moderately small hyperlink size is most effective in promoting cooperation. This is attributed to the fact that increasing the size of hyperlinks can lead to higher densities and average hyperdegrees, which can impede cooperation. The findings also highlight the importance of the timing of cooperation emergence and the rate at which cooperation increases with the synergy factor. The research validates these conclusions on empirical temporal hypernetworks, including an intergovernmental organization's dataset. The results indicate that a slow structural change can promote the formation of cooperator aggregation, thereby fostering cooperation. This work has implications for understanding cooperation in various contexts, including human online interactions and international organizations. In this study, the authors explore the evolution of cooperation in temporal hypernetworks, a complex system that encapsulates both spatial and temporal dimensions. They propose a novel framework to model this process, incorporating elements from evolutionary game theory and network science. The key concept is the introduction of temporal hypernetworks, which are composed of subhypernetworks representing interactions at different time points. The authors first define the payoffs for defectors and cooperators in reorganized and unchanged hyperlinks, using equations 5a and 5b and 6a and 6b, respectively. They then construct synthetic hypernetworks based on empirical datasets, utilizing the Holm-Kim model to generate static networks with high clustering coefficients and scale-free distributions. These synthetic networks are then used to create temporal hypernetworks through the activation of links with a probability p, resulting in a series of snapshots. The authors also discuss the importance of considering higher-order interactions in the evolution of cooperation, as these interactions can significantly influence the emergence and maintenance of cooperative behavior. They reference several studies that have demonstrated the role of such interactions in promoting cooperation, including the work by 15, 16, 19. Moreover, the authors emphasize the significance of considering temporal dimensions in the analysis of cooperation, citing examples from human interactions and intergovernmental organizations 3, 4, 6, 10, 11, 12, 14. The temporal dimension introduces an additional layer of complexity, as it allows for the evolution of cooperation over time, and the formation of subhypernetworks that can shift dynamically. In conclusion, the paper presents a novel framework for understanding the evolution of cooperation in complex systems, integrating insights from evolutionary game theory, network science, and temporal dynamics. The authors demonstrate how higher-order interactions and temporal dimensions can significantly influence the emergence and maintenance of cooperative behavior, providing new avenues for research in this field. In the realm of evolutionary game theory, researchers have been exploring the dynamics of cooperation and group interactions in structured populations. A recent study by Li et al. 2021 delves into the evolutionary dynamics of synergistic and discounted group interactions within these populations, utilizing a hypergraph framework to model higher-order interactions among individuals. The authors demonstrate that when both synergistic and discounted group interactions are present, cooperation can be hindered, as opposed to scenarios where only one type of interaction is present. The paper also discusses how different strategies evolve over time in response to changes in population structure, such as varying levels of synergy or discounting. Furthermore, the authors examine the role of aspiration dynamics in driving the evolution of cooperation, highlighting the importance of considering both the strength and direction of selection pressures on the emergence of cooperative behavior. Moreover, the study emphasizes the significance of considering the temporal nature of interactions, as well as the interconnectedness of individuals within the population. It is shown that the presence of temporal correlations between interactions can significantly impact the evolutionary trajectories of strategies, leading to novel outcomes not observed in static network models. This research contributes to our understanding of how higher-order interactions influence the emergence and maintenance of cooperation in complex systems, shedding light on the interplay between synergistic and discounted group interactions, aspiration dynamics, and temporal correlations. The findings have implications for understanding the evolution of cooperation in various contexts, from microbial communities to human societies, and underscore the importance of considering the full range of interactions present in these systems. In addition to this, the paper references a range of previous studies on evolutionary games, including work on the rock-paper-scissors game, multiplayer games, and the role of social networks in facilitating cooperation. These references provide a comprehensive backdrop for the current research, highlighting the ongoing efforts to understand the complex interplay of factors driving the evolution of cooperation in structured populations. Here is a combined summary of pages 11 and 12. The authors propose a novel framework for constructing temporal hypernetworks from pairwise interactions, which capture higher-order interactions between individuals. Figure 1 illustrates this construction process, where pairwise networks are transformed into hypernetworks, and then aggregated into temporal hypernetworks. Each hyperlink in the hypernetwork represents a group of individuals that interact with each other, with weights indicating the frequency of interactions. The authors then analyze the properties of these temporal hypernetworks, focusing on the emergence of cooperation in the context of the prisoner's dilemma game. Figure 2 presents the results, showing that higher-order interactions and sparse components promote cooperation. The fraction of cooperators, FC, is plotted as a function of the synergy factor, R, on both empirical and synthetic temporal hypernetworks. The authors introduce the concept of connected density, which measures the density of connected components in the network, rather than the traditional density that focuses on individual links. They demonstrate that the connected density changes over time, with an initial drop followed by a slow increase, as the time interval tau increases. The authors also investigate the average hyperlink size, finding that it increases with the window size increment t. Distributions of hyperlink sizes are presented for synthetic hypernetworks, showing that those with a higher probability of link activation, p equals 0.6, have larger hyperlink sizes. Finally, the authors provide an intuition for the change in connected density over time, illustrating how the temporal network evolves from isolated nodes to a giant component, and eventually becomes connected. The simulations are performed with 10 to the power of 3 repetitions, each with 10 to the power of 6 rounds of interactions, and the results are averaged over these simulations. The research discusses the promotion of cooperation in complex systems through temporal hypernetworks. It presents empirical and synthetic results demonstrating how temporal interactions can enhance cooperation compared to static networks. The synergy factor and frequency of cooperators are key variables analyzed. Figures and tables illustrate the advantages of higher-order interactions and the role of hyperlink sizes in promoting cooperation. The study also explores the application of these concepts to intergovernmental organizations, highlighting the impact of different types of hyperlinks on cooperation. Overall, the research emphasizes the significance of temporal interactions and higher-order connections in fostering cooperation in complex systems.